Okay, good evening. Good evening. All right, a couple of announcements. As I mentioned before, I think we're set on cookies from the Adult 3 class. The list was quite extensive. Well, yeah, you know what?
Janice.
Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't even read the amount until just now. 6 dozen, 4 dozen, 2 dozen, 18 dozen. Is Marilyn here? That's not 18 dozen, is it?
It's 3 big boxes and a box big check. 3 or 4 boxes into that. 18 cookies, 16 or something like that. My math may not be right.
Hey. And then 2 holes of cheese.
Cheese and crackers.
Okay. All right, and then I want to clarify a point of contention from this morning. Just so we're all in the clear and there are no hard feelings. I actually have had no-bake cookies before. I just didn't realize they were them sticky oatmeal things. I thought they were talking about actually putting a bowl of cookie dough in boiling water and boiling it, and cooking it like a chicken. That was my confusion here. So they were talking about boiling cookies, Steve. I was confused.
Boiling chicken?
Not me. What's that buffet the preachers always go to, Barry? Shoney's boils it. I don't boil it.
Supposed to fry chicken.
You can at least boil it all the way through. I told the kids at camp I like my chicken medium rare, so just a little bit of pink in there. All right, so there's that. Continue to pray for this week as everybody gets prepared to leave and everything's done. So the kids and the sponsors can focus just on that week and the task at hand. So the last week's always the hardest to prepare for before we do anything like that. There will be no evening services next week. Next week is Father's Day. So there'll be no evening services next Sunday and the Sunday after that. Now, granted, Katie Clark will probably be up here doing VBS stuff, but there will be no services the 15th or the 22nd that night. Still morning services. All right. With that, let me pray, and we'll get into it. Father, as we come before the throne, we know that we're just even a few are gathered, that you are in their midst, and I pray that you would come into our midst tonight, that you would speak to us, that you would empower us, that you would embolden us to go the distance, to share the gospel, and to be everything that you have created us to be. And I pray this in your Son's precious name. Amen. We will be in 2 Kings chapter 13. If you would, open your Bibles and turn to 2 Kings 13. This is a story that I've referenced once before in a Sunday morning sermon over the death of Elisha. And if you will remember, this is as I was using this illustration, this is the one where I busted my finger on the table down there. So we'll not be doing that tonight. I won't be busting any fingers, but I do think it's an important section of Scripture to devote an entire message to. So we're going to look at some of the nuts and bolts of the death of Elisha and Joash and what it means for us today. So let me set the scene first off. At this point, Israel has been divided into 2 kingdoms after King Solomon's death. You know, and during the reign of Solomon's son Rehoboam, Israel was split into 2 kingdoms. Judah was the southern kingdom, and Israel was the northern kingdom. Now, many of the kings in these kingdoms, in both kingdoms, they have a lot of hard to name, hard to pronounce names that often sound the same, and sometimes 2 men having the same name across both kingdoms. So we're not going to get into the biblical history and archaeology, not archaeology, Study of names and genealogy. Yes, thank you. We're not going to get into the genealogy. Occasionally, there are kings that are referenced, the same king is referenced by two names. You know, or the spelling changes between books, throne names, and given names. And the first one we're going to look at today, the first of the key players, if you will, is Joash, king of Israel, or also known by Jehoash. Joash and Jehoash. We meet him in 2 Kings 13, in verses 10 and 11. It says, "In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash, the son of Jehoaz, began to reign over Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 16 years. He also did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel to sin, but he walked in them, though he was not a good man." Now there are two men that we will reference slightly today. Two men named Joash, Joash, who are kings at the same time. So not a lot of variety in the names here. We have two kings in neighboring kingdoms. One's named Joash, the other's named Joash. It's like you pick a name for your baby because you don't hear that anymore. And then as soon as you pick that name and that baby's born, you write it on the birth certificate. Every single child you meet is named that baby. So that's what it feels like here. But so with the rare exceptions, kings on both sides, in Judah and Israel, there are rare exceptions. But the general rule is that they can be summed up the same as Joash. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and did not depart from the sins before him. By and large, this is how the kings performed. This is how the kings acted. Now, not only did Joash not do anything about the sins of Israel, or the sins of his fathers, or the sins of his land, he walked in sin. He reveled in the sin of his people, and he led his people to sin. And what this is doing is writing the writing on the wall here. They're walking in sin, and you can see it's about 120 years later that Assyria comes and they conquer Israel. Because the people are walking in sin, the leaders will not do anything about it. Therefore, they're leading their people and their country to walk in sin. They're setting the stage for the incoming invasion, the incoming judgment from the Lord. And that leads us to our second key player, Elisha. Now, as you know, Elisha, he studied under the great Elijah, one of the greatest of the Old Testament prophets. And before Elijah was taken up to heaven, Elisha asked for a double portion. They said, what son can I give you? And Elisha says, I want a double portion of what you have. I want a double portion of God's blessing. In 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 9, it says, "When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, 'Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you.' And Elisha said, 'Please, let there be a double portion of your spirit on me.'" What a thing to ask for. Right? What a thing. Like, please, give me a double portion of what you have. Give me a double portion of your spirit. Elisha, he advised kings. He was even respected by sinful men. I think this is one of the ways you can judge the effectiveness of leaders in the church or leaders in the faith is when they are respect. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. You see their relationship with sinful men, and they are respected by them. Not that they condone their lives, not that they are living a part of that, but they're truly living the example of Jesus to be where the need is. They're not scared to go where the need is. They're not scared to share the gospel with these sinful kings who could kill them just as easily as that and take their head. Elisha had such power. And it's power that I believe a power in God that we should all aspire to. He had such power that years after his death, there was a dead man who was buried where Elisha was buried. And when the dead man touched the bones of Elisha, the man sprang back to life. This is the power of God in this man. This is the double portion of Elijah's spirit. And it says when Elisha, now we're getting into kind of the meat of the story is what we want to talk about today, after I've taken just a minute to set that stage. And we're going to start in verse 14 of 2 Kings 13. And we want to get into a little bit of his interaction with Joash. It says, "Now when Elisha had fallen sick with the illness of which he was about to die, Joash, king of Israel, went down to him and wept before him, crying, 'My father, the chariots of Israel and his horsemen.'" Now, knowing what we know about these two men, Joash, who is a king who was walking in sin, and Elisha, this man who was a prophet of God, who received a double portion of Elijah's spirits, knowing what we know about them, it begs the question, why did Joash come to Elisha? Why did he come to him, especially as Elisha is on his deathbed? I think he feels the walls closing in him. Joash has walked in sin for many years, and he can feel maybe the whispers of invasion and the whispers of coming darkness, and he can feel it about. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And those times in our lives when we're walking in sin, we're doing things we know we shouldn't be doing. And you see it in movies all the time where the guy he's lost, he's out there, he's doing what he can do, and there comes a moment where you begin to realize that the walls are closing in on you. And it's getting tighter and tighter, like the trash compactor in Star Wars Episode 4, New Hope, where you know what? That's another conversation. These are Millennium Falcons, by the way. They're not cats, and it's not the Death Star. People know who you are. He feels the walls closing in. He says, my father, my father. Now this is a sign of respect. He's not actually addressing him as his father. He says, this is a sign of respect. I know who you are. And I know what God has done through you, regardless of the way I live my own life. Now there is an example here for Elisha living a godly life in spite of the people's sin. And that is sometimes people aren't going to want to hear the power of God in our lives. But we must sit as Elisha did and be ready for when the walls begin to close in on them so that when they come to us. Because a lot of times out there, people don't want to hear it until things get bad. Until the walls begin to close in. And that is when we as the church must be ready and willing to stand up and to share the gospel and to speak to them as Elisha does. Because they don't want us oftentimes until they need us. That's where we see Joash right now. Regardless of the way I live my own life, I'm feeling burdened and I'm feeling alone and I feel the walls closing in. Now I want to talk to somebody. Now's the time. We should all strive to be this kind of man or woman that people run to in times of trouble. We should all strive to be an Elisha that set a godly example. A source of strength, a source of security, a source of comfort. That when things get bad, people know, I'm going over there. When things get scary, they know a source of steady comfort into who we are. We should all strive to be these sorts of men and women on whom such power rests that even a sinful world can acknowledge it. That even a sinful people and a sinful family and a sinful workforce, even they can acknowledge the power of God in our lives. What an example Elisha set. I can think of men across history who set this kind of example. It's like Billy Graham or David Wilkerson or George Mueller, these men of prayer and steadfastness and faith who stood in the gap. That when things got bad in their nation, Charles Spurgeon, among others, when things get bad, the people know where to go. The chariots of Israel and the horsemen. He says, my father, is a sign of respect. He says, the chariots of Israel and the horsemen. Then he's beginning to get to the point. And when he says the chariots of Israel and the horsemen, I need help. That's what he said. I need help. I can feel it. I can feel it closing in. He's getting to the point. Joash needs help, and he is well aware of Elisha's communion with God. He knows Elisha's connection, and he knows the power that rests in his words and his actions. Elisha's prayers, and they were considered to be perhaps more powerful than, or more valuable than military power. He says, Elisha, pray for me. Because at this moment in my life, your prayers and your connection with God are much more valuable than chariots and horses and armies and men. Pray for me. Because Elisha lived the example. His prayers were considered more important than the things of man. And Elisha, as this man, Joash, this king, this boy, really, he chooses an object lesson for Joash to embrace the power of God. Because when people come to us in these moments, anybody can ask for help. Often, sometimes when they ask for help, that doesn't mean they want to get better. Maybe they want a handout or this or that. So asking for help doesn't necessarily mean I want help. So Elisha is giving him an object lesson. He is testing his mettle, if you will, or his motivations. And we pick that up in verse 15. And it says, and Elisha said to him, take a bow and arrows. So he took a bow and arrows. And then he said to the king of Israel, draw the bow. And he drew it. And Elisha laid his hands on the king's hands, and he said, open the window eastward. And he opened it. Then Elisha said, shoot. And he shot. And he said, the Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Syria, for you shall fight the Syrians at Aphek until you have made an end of them. This is why Joash came, isn't it? This is what I was looking for. This is the thing. I needed help, and God has promised me the victory. Thank God I got what I needed. I'll see you guys on the way out. It was an ancient custom to shoot arrows or cast a spear into the country in which an army intended to invade. See, once the dart or the spear or the arrow was thrown, it was an emblem of a commencement of hostilities. So this is what Elisha is doing, and he knows this. He would have been familiar with these customs. But knowing God is with Joash and has made that victory available is not the end of the lesson. Because we know God has made the victory available. We know that with God, His promises are to find their yes in Him. We know all these things. We know He has promised the victory. That's not the end of the story. Because much like a person's salvation experience, we have to fight this battle from God has saved me, so my work is over. God has saved me. He has come to me. What else is there to do? God has saved me. The battle has been won. We must fight against this good enough attitude. It's good enough, or I did my part, or this or that. Now, Elisha makes it clear, these arrows, they symbolize your victory. He shoots the arrow out of the window towards the east. He says that the victory over Syria, what you shoot, so will your victory come. He's making it apparent here in Joash's symbolic effort. This is his victory. Now, with that in mind, that these arrows symbolize the victory of Joash and his people, with this in mind, in a proper sense of the desperation in which Joash was walking in at the moment, the natural reaction would be to enthusiastically attack every opportunity, would it not? If God has promised me the victory if I do this, wouldn't the reaction that makes sense is to attack that with everything I have and take every opportunity and to pour myself out into what God has given me if He has promised me the victory if I do this? That's why frustrated with people who, I need victory in my life. I need this, I need that. Things are going wrong. How come nobody wants me around? Boo-hoo and boo-hoo and all that pseudo-religion nonsense. But they have no desire to be around God's people. They have no desire really to commune with God at all. I need victory in my life. Well, God has promised you that if you read His Word, He will speak to you. Well, I don't have time for my Bible study. I just need God to speak to me. He has given us the keys to victory, and people, yet we still have no desire to get into His Word and to study His Word and to unpack it and to look at what it means and what it meant for them and for us. You know, one of the most comforting things I went through last week was Caleb Kent, that tall, you guys know who he is, the giant 8th grader. He's going to preach the Falls Creek service when the youth comes back and recaps their Falls Creek service. And I said, do you have anything you want to preach on? And he had a list of things. I said, well, come by Friday, 9 o'clock. I'll take you through the whole day with me. We'll do sermon prep, we'll go on visits, we'll do the whole thing. And I was expecting, oh, I got this, I got that, I can't do it. 9 o'clock, he called me. I got here a little earlier, and he was saying, can I come up there now? Let's get to work. We sat there for 2 hours in my office, in a whiteboard, digging into the Word. He had some verses from 2 Corinthians, and we wrote it on the board, and we talked about it. And we dug into it. And, well, what does this mean? Well, what does this word mean? We were highlighting words, and we were talking. We were, okay, this, and at least this. It was so comforting to talk about the Bible with someone so young that has such a zeal in his heart that just needs to be directed. A lot of these kids have zeal in this town. A lot of these kids have zeal in this church. They just need someone to point them in the right direction and to properly fuel that zeal so that they know what to do with it. Because they're going to find something to do with it one way or another. They are. And I took him on a visit to the village, and we talked to Pat and Donna and Martha, and I kind of, with Martha, I let him take the lead. And I said, you want to learn about God's faithfulness, you go talk to Martha Love. And she'll teach you something you didn't know. and we did, and it really is refreshing to see that young people are looking for answers, and they're coming back to the Bible, and they're looking for it in the Bible. Okay. The arrows symbolize the victory of Joash. So what you shoot, so your victory will come. Now, like I said, with that in mind, the proper sense of his desperation, you'd think he would take every opportunity to attack his opportunity for victory, but he doesn't. And see, and then there's what we would think, or what we would like to think we would do in that situation, and then there's Joash. And to pick it up in verse 18, and he said, take the arrows, and he took them. And he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground with them, which means shoot them into the ground. And he struck 3 times and stopped. And then the man of God was angry with him, and he said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times, and then you would have struck down Syria until you made an end of it. But now you will strike down Syria only 3 times. Now notice that it says he struck 3 times and stopped. It's not that he struck 3 times where he struck the ground. It's not that he struck 3 times and he ran out of arrows. It's not that he struck 3 times and ran out of time. It's that he struck 3 times and he stopped. He chose to stop. What it's doing is it's making sure is to inform us that he still had arrows left to give. He still had arrows in the quiver, not to mention the man of God's angry response to Joash. Elisha says to Joash, the arrows represent your victory, and you have the opportunity of trusting in God to defeat your enemies forever, shoot every single arrow you have. Take every single opportunity you have. Don't stop 3 times. Say, well, that's enough for today. When God has called us to go, we go. We don't step halfway out the door. There's so much opportunity out there. And yet we hold back for whatever reason. Why? Why do people hold back? Well, victory, let me tell you, victory for only a little while, there's no victory at all. Church growth based on smoke and mirrors, it's not church growth. That's not victory. The seeker-sensitive model or prosperity gospel, that's not victory. That's putting lipstick on a pig. What holds us back? It seems as if we're just holding the door, and we can't. And people, we can't really decide. Do I want to do this or do I want to do that? I saw it countless times at Teen Challenge that people would come and say, "I'm here to get better. I'm here to get sober. I'm here to get cleaned up." Never once do they mention the fact that I'm here to find Jesus. Not to find Jesus, but I'm here to trust Jesus with my life. I need healing. So what they did was they leave the door open. You know, you live in a life of sin. You live in a life that you know you shouldn't be doing. And whatever it is, addictions or lies or whatever the arena may be. But you choose to step out of that. God heals. Well, you ask God to heal you, and you step out of that life, and you step into a new life. But what so often happens here is people leave the door open. Just in case. Just in case. And maybe they don't even know they left the door open, but they keep up those relationships with that past life. They keep up this or that. And maybe they don't even know the door is open. All they know is they can still smell that old life. When the door is open, chances are you'll drift, and you'll drift, and you'll go back. Has anyone ever tried to follow God halfway and then wondered why things aren't happening? You know, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Come to church on Sunday, but never do a Bible study, this and that. I can serve. I can lead a class. I can do this. I can do that. Whatever it is, but you're not. There's really no pursuit of a holy God. I bet we have people in our lives that are following halfway and they're questioning why God's not working in their lives. The churches that are following halfway, they're doing the surface level stuff. They're putting that lipstick on real nice, but there's no transformation. There's no work of God. There's no spirit in that church. There's no prayer. There's no fasting. There's no teaching. There's no preaching. There is none of that stuff. It's all surface level church growth, seeker-sensitive baloney. And then we finally come to the point of desperation where enough is enough and it's time to plead to God. Rock bottom, as we call it. Where enough is enough. I'll do whatever you tell me to do, Lord, because the enemy is closing in on all sides, and I've come to the point where I know that God is my only rescue. I'll shoot every arrow I have until I can't move anymore, because I know that you are the one to fight for me. We can't do things half in and half out. There is no effectiveness in that kind of life. There is no victory in that kind of life. These couples that come in and want counseling, but they're living in sin outside. There can be no victory until you nip some of that stuff in your bud. And you do what you know you're supposed to. I don't care. Well, and I hear this one a lot. Financially, it just doesn't make sense. I can't. Financially, we can't make it happen. And I get that. That's a hard one to counteract. But at some point, we're going to say, do I want to live, or do I want to be financially viable? I'll do whatever you tell me to do because the enemy is closing in and I don't want to die. I will shoot every arrow in my quiver. Christ has given us the arrows. Christ gave us the arrows. He filled the quiver. Since Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, all the way to Revelation 22. He has filled it. And he says in Mark chapter 12, verse 30, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. Now you may have been in Joash's shoes before, walking in sin, and it starts to feel like everything is too much, and maybe you start to see that thing on the horizon that's coming to finish you off. Maybe we have family members like that who are starting to get to that desperate situation where I can see the destroyer on the horizon and I can see that they are coming for me, and that is the thing that will end me, that the walls are closing in on each side. Maybe that's us, maybe that's them, and they have come, but the point is the same, that people would come and seek God's help the same as Joash. We must be willing to stand as Elisha when Joash comes. I'm not Elisha, and I don't have that double portion of Bob Birch's spirit on me. But here is your object lesson. Shoot every single arrow you have. Take every single opportunity you have. That God, I need you to come into my home. I need you to come into my marriage. I need you to come into my relationships and my work and my heart and my life and my job and my children. God, I need you everywhere that I am and everything that I do. I need you in every moment of every day. This is what we should plead before the throne. This is what we should plead before a holy God. You can't just give him one and expect results. You can't just give him one part of your life and expect him to work in every part of your life. You can't just give him your job and expect this. It doesn't work like that. Every single aspect of our life. And when you stop trying to follow him with 1 foot in and 1 foot out, nothing will separate you from the victory of Christ's love for you. Because if he is for us, then who can be against us? Church, let me pray for you. Father, you have the victory. You hold the victory in your hands. And I pray that as you give us opportunities to be obedient, that we would answer the call. That we would not follow halfway, but we would follow fully devoted as followers of Jesus Christ. And we would be an example in our community, an example to our friends and our families and our places of work, God. That when the walls begin to close in on those around us, they would see through our lives a beacon of hope. The power of Christ, the calming of the storm. And they would know there is a person who has peace. There is a person who has victory. It is in the power of this victory, I pray. The church said, amen. You guys be blessed.